Kevin, thank you so much for coming up here on this beautiful stage today at the Vancouver Art Show. I'm Deborah with Mission Accepted Podcast, and there's a reason why, I think, other than your name, that we've got you up here. You have one of the most incredible stories that I've ever heard in terms of entrepreneurship. So if you're not familiar with the show, we interview entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs and creatives and media. And I believe when I talked to you, you kind of hit all four categories. I think you did. So maybe two things. One is tell us why your name is Freakshow. The other is please share your story on how becoming an artist came to you.
Well, first I want to say thank you for having me on. I got the name Freakshow because you don't give yourself your own nickname, but my friends growing up as a younger person used to always call me a freak show because if there was pretty girls in the club, they would look from afar and they would be like, oh, look at that beautiful woman. And then they'd go, what's O'Quinn doing over there? And so I didn't care. I just went and, I don't know, just stuck. And then when I had to do a moniker for my artwork, I thought Freak Show was perfect with the style I do. And everybody seemed to like it, so I just stuck with it. So
that works.
Yeah.
That works. If they like it, then you know it's a go, right?
For sure.
You did good market research.
Yeah.
Good market research.
Yeah, I asked my buddies when they were drinking beer. I'm like, what do you think of this? Yeah.
They're like, it's perfect. It's a freak show.
That's
okay.
Right.
You have an incredible story. I mean, sometimes I believe people find art, and sometimes art finds people.
Yes.
And I kind of think for you, art found you in a very interesting way. That's when I was listening to your story, I was telling my friends last night, I'm like, I'm gonna take you over to a booth of a gentleman who walked into the dollar store and grabbed a canvas. They're like, what? So just give some backstory a little bit for our viewers and listeners on how art found you.
Well, art found me in the sense that I always try stuff. I've done stand-up comedy, I had a film production company for a decade, I've owned a restaurant, I've done a lot of things. But all those kind of things were based on monetary outcomes, let's say. It wasn't like I just went into it. It always had a monetary stigma to it for me to work. And they were successful, but they weren't, it was a different vibe. And then I had a severe back injury in 2000, and for about 7 years I was on Percocets. And on the 7th year, my brother-in-law, who's a nurse, said, you're addicted to opiates. And I was like, what? No, me? And so I talked to my doctor, and he's like, hey, you can go to a day rehab kind of thing. It's not an overnight thing. You go 14 days in a row, and they'll clean you up and give you some stuff, and blah, blah, blah. And the greatest thing I ever got at the rehab was meditation.
Right.
I'd never done it before, but we'd do it twice a day, and it was absolutely the most amazing thing that I'd ever tried. So then a couple weeks later, I leave, and they say, continue with your meditation, Kevin. And I'm like, I certainly will. When I got home, I couldn't do it.
Okay.
My brain would not shut down. I played the wave music. I did anything you could think of to try and zen yourself down, and it wouldn't work. So after a few days of frustration, I went online and I read that the same part of the brain that's used for meditation is used in art and painting and drawing. So when I was a boy, I was pretty good at drawing, if you ask my grandmother. But I just said, okay, well, I'm not gonna break the bank trying to see if this works. So I just went to the dollar store and I bought $1 acrylic paints and I bought a $1 small canvas and had no idea what I was doing and just started painting. And then I realized I was totally zoned out in my painting.
Right.
And I enjoy that feeling because it really just takes you away to another place when your sole focus is on one specific thing. And then from there, I just started doing more and more, and then actually realizing there's an Opus and a Michael's out in the world, which was very rare and weird. I was like, oh, okay. So then I started buying real canvases and proper paints, and then I'd be like, I'm bored, let's try another medium. I wanted to try to spray paints. I wanted to do a bunch of other things, and then eventually I got around to my style as everybody kind of knows it now. So.
Okay, what would you call your style? I mean, for those that are watching, they're able to see a piece while we're doing this interview, but there's a lot of people that will just be listening. So when they're looking up you online, what do you call your style?
It's always called pop art. Like
Pop art,
everybody
yeah.
always calls it
Yeah.
pop art. My pop art, and there's tons of people that do pop art. I always try and do tongue in cheek when I'm doing it. Like I hide things in there, or I just play on words or whatever. And that's kind of how I step away from the rest of the people, I guess, because that's kind of my angle on it.
Yeah.
I always want to make people smile, and I always want them, if somebody buys a piece, 2 weeks later when it's hanging up in their living room, they look at it and go, oh, I didn't even notice that.
Right.
So I enjoy that the most out of the process, actually.
I think what I found really interesting was that when I was at your booth last night and I was with a colleague, and when you were telling her and then telling me that you research, so you have celebrities in your pictures.
Yes.
And but you actually do a deep dive. And I think it's really interesting when you do that deep dive, the things that you find out and then the elements that you present.
I do that even with the images.
Right.
Like, there's a few celebrities that were uber popular, and you'd think, what are you talking about? He's only got 5 pictures that are actually workable that you could use.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I try and deep dive on icons that you don't see that image very often.
Right.
As opposed to, oh, I've seen Marilyn Monroe,
Right.
always the same. So I always look for a different image. But like I said, bringing that up, Marilyn Monroe and Audrey Hepburn are very, very few photos of them out
Right.
there.
So here you go, and you're online. I love this. You're online, and you're looking for something that relates to, that's going to give you the relief that meditation did, because you can't stop the chatter.
Yeah.
Very common in the world of meditation. I know, it's my background.
Okay.
People are like, I can't meditate. I'm like, I've been doing it 20 years. If you're thinking of your grocery store list, that's perfect. That's exactly where you need to be.
Oh,
Okay. So here you go from there. You start playing. You start playing with the art, and then. What was your idea or inspiration, or how did you get prompted to go, I'm going to take this to market? I mean, it's one thing to do it for, self-relief, I guess. It's another thing to go, I think that there's something here. How did that happen?
Well, if you're any member of the O'Quinn family, there's no easy ride. Nobody softens it. Nobody does anything. They say, sounds pretty easy. Go take it to a gallery and see what they think.
Right.
Because at that point, all my friends and family were like, wow, these are amazing. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's your job. Like, you wouldn't be my friend or a family member if you said, oh, this is gross.
Right.
And so my wife and a bunch of people just said, well, just go find a gallery, bring your piece in and see what happens. And so I walked into this gallery in Yaletown, and the gentleman behind the desk, sweet man, William, and he looked at it and he's like, who did these? And I'm like, oh, I did. And he goes, you need to have a show. And it was super weird. And I'm like, sorry? And he goes, how many of these do you have? And I'm like, I don't know, 10? He goes, you got to have at least 15 or 20. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, so let's give you 2 months. Can you get it done? And I'm like, yep. And so we had a show and we sold pieces. And I had actually just had my back surgery finally done, so I was showing up there with a cane, and everybody thought I was like this aloof artist with a cane. But little did they know I just had back surgery. But from that, I got tons of word of mouth, and I'm still like so green in the whole art thing that I think it really helps me in the art world, because, well, you got to do this to get into a gallery, you got to do that to get into a gallery. My wife and I went to New York in 2019, and I just walked into galleries in New York who were snooty as you can all be, and I'd be like, look, this is my art, this is what and then they'd be like, well, we're not, and I said, well, here's the deal. You take this piece, you sell it, you keep all the commission, all of it. You sell it for whatever you want, and they're like, what? And I said, yeah, but if you sell it and collect that money, then we have a relationship, and I'll start getting pieces in your gallery. And they're like, oh, so then we leave, and my wife's like, you're crazy, why would you do that?
Right.
And I said, well, what kind of person, I would use a more colorful letter, but what kind of person that's a legit gallery would sell an artist piece knowing how much effort it is and keep it all? Nobody would do that. But the fact that I offered that up intrigued them, and they're like, oh, so you're betting on yourself. And I'm just like, yeah. So just little things like that I always do.
So that's when I said that you're, clearly you've had many businesses that you shared, but that in itself is a very creative form of marketing. And I think that's brilliant. If someone's listening, that's a gemstone. Really, you put yourself on the line, and it made someone stand back and open the door.
Yeah, for people out there that are, because a lot of excuses I hear when I say to people about certain things, not that I know everything, but I was once told that, what's the worst thing that could happen if you ask somebody something? It's 50-50.
Right.
So if you're sitting at a table and you see somebody and you're like, oh, that's so-and-so, wow, I wonder if they'd like that. If you go up to them and they say no, it'd be the same thing if you didn't go up to them. But there's also that opportunity that you may go up to them and they may say yes. So what have you lost? Nothing.
Right.
So I've lived by that, and I've lived by the fact that I look at how everybody else is doing it, and I see that lineup, and I think, well, there's got to be a better way that nobody's doing. Go through the side door. And that's basically how I've done anything I've been successful with, is just, it's all about numbers. If there's 1,000 people there and 4 of us over here, well, you're bound to do better over here. And that's it. You just gotta believe in yourself, and there'll be tons of people that have full-time jobs to shit on you, and you just have to go, okay, because my grandma, just side note, my grandma used to get bullied a lot as a kid, and they used to say evil shit. And she's Irish, and she's like, what the fuck, do you care? Do you care about this boy? And I'm like, no. And she'd be like, so feck him. And that's basically it. There's a lot of people that have insecurities and are jealous and whatever else, because we're all human and we all have that, but you can't listen to the noise. Even if somebody says your stuff sucks, keep going, keep going, keep going. It's all about you and your path, because it's not a sprint. There's very few, sadly, the ones that are super successful overnight, the press makes it sound like they're super successful, but they've been doing it for 12 years in their basement.
Right.
And then something hits. So, yeah, just believe in yourself, basically.
And I think you made a very important point of someone believed in you in a roundabout way. And many of us, we talk about our grandmother or our grandfather or our neighbor or a teacher. For some people it was a real teacher, but you took it in. Sometimes people give us that positive advice and we hear it, but then this goblin hears more than this goblin hears. How do you keep yourself fueled? I mean, you seem very self-fueled, but have you ever experienced nervousness putting your things out there? Are you nervous before you go talk to that art gallery owner? What's your process?
I think because I did stand-up for so long, I'm never nervous in that sense. And I also, for as much as I believe in myself, every time I have a win, I'm just like, that person's a lunatic. Why would you spend that kind of money on this kind of, that's my internal thing that I always have to, be happy, it's all good. But as far as that, I don't know, I'm not nervous. I'm never nervous to talk to another human being.
Right.
Because I know it doesn't matter what kind of presentation they're giving, they're still a human being with feelings and anxieties and all that kind of stuff. So I'm never into it. But the number one thing is I never talk to somebody unless I have something to say. I'm not there to waste your time.
Right.
Like, I'm not there to say, right in your face, hey, you own a gallery, you want to put my stuff? I don't do anything like that. But I also, after you've heard somebody all day listen to the same question, I come in again from the side door.
Right.
And I'll say something that you'll be like, oh, how did you know that? Or whatever, so I've got your attention. And I'm also, the other thing I would tell people, be polite, have manners. Because at the end of the day, you're asking people for their time. Even that 5-minute conversation. So that's what I noticed yesterday at the gallery here. It was so busy that I felt so bad because people would come into my booth and I couldn't get to them. And
Right.
I'd see them, but I couldn't, and I felt bad. But yeah, you just be polite, and people always remember that.
So here you are, you're selling these beautiful pieces, you've got this incredible story, you've had this real switch in your life. It sounds to me that this was your first being an artist. Did you have people around you go, what are you doing? Like, did you have to fend that off as well? It sounds like you're really strong on yourself, but did you go through a process of, this is what I'm doing now? Is this my new life?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Everybody was supportive, but you also know you're crazy because I don't know anybody that's an artist that makes a living.
Yes.
You know what I mean? That changed as soon as I sold a piece.
Okay.
As soon as I sold one piece, and it was a small little, tiny little thing that I got $125 for or something, they're like, oh. And then they'd come to a gallery show and they'd go, what are all the red stickers for?
Okay.
And the gallery owner would be like, oh, that's sold, that's sold, that's sold. So they kind of, the family have always believed in it because they've seen successes that I've done just because I'm stubborn.
Right.
But I've been very blessed. Like I was telling somebody yesterday, this is the first thing I've ever done that wasn't monetary. And it's the most successful thing I've done, monetarily wise. Because I was talking to another artist yesterday as well, and I said, the thing about me is it's considered rude to say that you need to make money off your art. They're like, oh, you're an artist, it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't, well, you're right, it shouldn't matter, but in reality, I gotta pay the rent and I gotta eat some food. So she goes, well, how do you do that? And I said, well, it's like a baby. You're painting it, you're finished with it, it's all complete, then it goes off to college. And all you're doing now is paying bills, so that's what it is, it's the business now. This is the price, this is what I need to sell, because if I sell this, I can do another one.
Right.
If I don't sell any, then my career is very short,
right.
And my house is filled with shit that my wife will be like, how many do we need in here?
Right.
Yeah.
So, and that's exactly it. I mean, I think we were talking about that a little earlier about the price. How do you price? What is your parameters around that? You know, the time, the energy, the market value. So for you, when you're doing a piece, what goes into that for you? And let's just put a little message out there for everybody that this is a business. That this is a business, and that when as a purchaser of beautiful art, the expectation is you're buying something creative.
Yeah. Pricing was difficult for me.
Yeah.
Because I'm just a regular guy. Like, so how do I say this? When you're selling on your own, you get 100% of the profit.
Right.
What few people know, when you go into galleries or this or that, they take a cut anywhere from 35% to 50%.
Right.
So the math is basically time plus size plus materials. For the most part, that'll be the price. And then when you get a gallery involved, you got to either double it to make your nut or discuss with them what they're willing to do. So that's kind of, for all artists, it's a little weird because sometimes collectors will say, well, why did I spend $700 more for something that you have here for? It's because they don't understand that $700 didn't go to me.
Right.
That was me renting space in the gallery, basically. So
right.
Events like this, because all the artists here, we're not paying anybody, so it's awesome. So that's why you should buy as many pieces as you can, people, because the prices won't be as low. But yeah, it's hard. And it's also hard because some galleries laugh at me and say, why is that so cheap?
Right.
Like my Biggie piece. Everybody and their dog says that should be a $35,000 piece.
Right.
Okay, but I'm happy at the price I put on it, and I can go make other ones.
Right.
But I'd rather my art be in someone's home, being enjoyed, as opposed to just in my studio or wherever. It's like those guys that collect all those classic cars, and they've got like freaking hundreds of them.
Right.
They only have one ass. Like, what are you doing? Like,
yeah.
There's only so many walls. Like, I'd rather have people enjoy it, and I do that all the time. If someone's super, passionate about my piece and they don't have enough to buy it, we'll work something out.
Work something out.
Yeah.
So I'm going to kind of just divert a little bit here. So you've had this experience of now, being an artist. Wasn't how you started. It wasn't like this epiphany that came to you when you were 6 years old or 7 years old, going back into your artwork. And so during this time, what's been one of your biggest surprises? Like, it could be something cool that happened, or a surprise within yourself, or I met this person in lieu of, like, what surprised you?
One that surprised me, just how you're talking about feelings and stuff, it just reminded me of something, but they go together. So my friend wanted to commission a piece for me to do for him. And I did it, and it probably took him and his wife a year to come up with the person that they'd agree on. and they really enjoyed Biff Naked when she was at her peak. They loved
Okay.
him. So I do this piece, I did the background with the Georgia Strait, and I had like a spaceman and all this kind of craziness. And in the background, I spray painted Van City. It was one of my favorite pieces.
Right.
Then I gave it to him, and then I went to his house 2 months later, and it was in their guest closet,
Oh.
right? And I was
Oh.
like, oh, that hurts.
Oh.
And so he's like, I hate the graffiti. It's not that you do it bad, I just hate it. And I'm like, okay, so it was a learning lesson for me that not
Right.
everybody likes my style in that sense.
Right.
So I was like feeling a little low, obviously, because your friend does that. And so I posted it on Twitter and I just tagged Biff Naked. And I just said, hey, anybody Biff Naked, da, da, da. And she sent me a private DM and she goes, that's one of the greatest pieces of myself I've ever seen.
Wow.
And I was like, she goes, when I come back to Vancouver, I'd love to see it in person. So that was a cool thing, just to be like, okay. So I learned 2 things. I learned that Biff Naked liked the piece I did, and you know, you have to, especially on commissions.
Right.
If I'm doing it for myself, I'm just gonna do it for myself. But on commissions, you just gotta ask the client a few more questions.
Got to ask a few more questions. That's a great surprise.
Yeah.
That's
Oh, yeah,
a
I
great
know.
surprise. Just show your friend that. Just go, excuse me. Look at the response. All of a sudden, that piece goes in the closet.
I did, and he loves me to death. But he's like, I still fucking hate that tagging bullshit. I'm like, all right.
All right. Look, thank you so much for coming up. Thanks for spending some time with us. Is there anything that you would like to share for anyone that's listening that is an artist in the making, is already an artist, an entrepreneur? Because really, that's what we are, right? Whatever we're creating. So is there any advice that you have that you'd like to share?
Well, I would say, and this isn't a plug, but if there's any artists, because I'm all about sharing and moving stuff forward, if anybody has any questions, you can go to my website, www.mrkevinoquinn, or Mr. Kevin O'Quinn on Instagram. If you DM me, if you have any questions or concerns about sizing, I make my own frames. I don't pay for frames. If you need any kind of assistance with any kind of like that stuff, I'm an open book. And I also teach classes on resining. So there's a lot of stuff that I can help with people, and I've done it this past year. But I just wanted to say thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No, absolutely. I have one last question for you.
Okay.
So, and this is a very important question if you've ever seen our podcast. And if anyone would like to come onto the podcast, I'll mention that as well. You're on your way to a desert island. You have one suitcase, and you're going, and you're not coming back. And you have one opportunity to take your favorite album. It's the album that you couldn't imagine not ever listening to again. What would you take?
Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
And it would be good because I'm on a deserted island. So.
Eating some mangoes.
That's right.
Making some pictures. Thank you so much for your time today. Congratulations on all your success. Thanks for having a chat with Deb.
Thank you. I appreciate
Okay.
that.
Bye.
Bye.